You start right.
You stay late. You say yes when others say no. You follow the rules. You sacrifice your time, your energy, your health for the job, for the team, for the promise of someday. You're loyal. You're honest. You take pride in doing things the right way, and yet, somehow, you're stuck. Watching someone else, someone who cuts corners, talks more than they work, knows the right people but lacks your skills, rise higher, faster, living the life you thought you'd earned. And you're left wondering, what did I do wrong? But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the real question is, what lie have I been told? From childhood, you were taught that hard work leads to reward, that effort equals outcome, that if you just grind long enough, the system will eventually notice, recognize, and repay you. But what if that formula is broken? Worse, what if it was never real to begin with? Nietzsche, the German philosopher who shattered illusions and exposed the hidden architecture of human belief, once wrote that moral labor, the kind of work glorified for its sacrifice, obedience, and humility, is not noble. It is a form of spiritual slavery, a psychological trap designed not to uplift you, but to keep you in place. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. In a world where power determines outcomes, morality is often used to control those who have none. You were taught to believe that virtue is its own reward, that if you just kept your head down and stayed good, life would eventually be fair. But life isn't fair. Life is competitive. Life is political. And the system you serve doesn't reward virtue. It rewards value. Not the value you create, but the value you control. That's why the nurse pulling a 12-hour shift gets paid less than the TikToker selling a get-rich-fast course. That's why a blue-collar worker who breaks their back every day will retire with barely enough, while someone who manipulates markets walks away with millions. It's not your fault that you believed the myth. In fact, the myth was designed for people like you, to keep you obedient, to keep you working, to keep you from asking dangerous questions like, who benefits from my loyalty? Who profits from my exhaustion? Why does the system praise hard work and reward something else entirely? Nietzsche didn't say you should stop working. He didn't glorify laziness or selfishness. What he challenged was the idea that obedient labor is inherently moral, that to suffer without reward is somehow sacred, that virtue means submission. He called this mindset slave morality, a belief system born not from strength, but from weakness, not from power, but from fear. And if you feel stuck despite doing everything right, you're not crazy, you're waking up. You're beginning to see that the world isn't malfunctioning. It's functioning exactly as it was built to. The people who rise aren't always the most skilled or the most selfless. They are the ones who understand power, how to navigate it, how to claim it, and how to detach their worth from whether or not the system approves. So ask yourself, what if working harder is not the answer? What if the belief in moral labor is not your salvation, but your cage? Because until you confront that lie, you'll keep grinding while someone else rewrites the rules. Let's take a closer look at the contradiction hiding in plain sight. If hard work leads to success, then why do the hardest working people in society so often struggle just to survive? Think about it. The construction workers who rise before the sun and labor until their backs ache. The nurses who pull 12-hour shifts, racing between patients, skipping meals, missing holidays. The delivery drivers, janitors, bus operators, truckers, people who keep cities alive, who make the physical world function. And yet, these are the same people who live paycheck to paycheck, who worry about rent, who can't afford to get sick. Meanwhile, someone filming get-rich-quick tips in a rented Lamborghini on TikTok is making more in a day than that nurse earns in a month. You feel it. You've seen it. This isn't a rare glitch in the system. This is the system. Because while labor builds the world, labor does not control it. The people who earn the most, CEOs, hedge fund managers, politicians, thought leaders, they are not the ones sweating in the heat or grinding in the cold. They are not pushing physical limits or sacrificing their bodies. They operate in a different domain entirely. The domain of leverage, perception, control. They don't just work, they position, they influence, they own. Let's be brutally honest. We've built a world where value isn't rewarded based on effort, but based on power. A world where controlling capital, networks, and narratives pays far more than producing anything tangible. And that world is by design. It's tempting to think this is unfair, that there's been some kind of mistake. But again, this isn't a malfunction. This is how the game has been set up for centuries. Because physical labor, no matter how honest, can be replaced, automated, outsourced, devalued. But control over resources, over people, over ideas, is scalable. The nurse can only treat one patient at a time. The investor can move billions with a single click. And the system favors scale. And here's where the lie of moral labor becomes especially cruel. We've been conditioned to believe that suffering is noble, that endurance is honorable, that those who serve quietly, who sacrifice without complaint, are the moral backbone of society, and they are. But morality doesn't pay the bills, praise doesn't build wealth, and sacrifice doesn't automatically translate into influence. While the working class is told to keep your head down and be grateful, those at the top are trained in strategy, in law, in manipulation, in capital acquisition. They are taught not to serve, but to manage, not to endure, but to dominate. They learn the rules, and then learn how to rewrite them. So ask yourself, if moral labor is so righteous, so essential, why doesn't it come with power? Why are the most indispensable workers also the most disposable? Why does society preach the value of hard work, then funnel the rewards elsewhere? Nietzsche would say, it's because the moral system itself was crafted by the powerful, not to liberate the masses, but to pacify them. It teaches obedience, not sovereignty, self-sacrifice, not self-assertion. It glorifies submission, then punishes those who dare to question the hierarchy. That's why the lie persists. Because it benefits those in charge. Because it keeps people striving, hoping, and working for a reward that never comes. Because the promise of someday is the most effective chain ever forged. So the question becomes clear. If hard work doesn't lead to power, then what does? And more importantly, are you willing to unlearn the lie you were raised to believe? To understand how this lie took hold, why the world continues to reward manipulation over merit, perception over perseverance, we have to go deeper. We have to look at the foundation of the values we've been taught to live by. And for that, we turn to Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche didn't see morality as a universal good. He saw it as a weapon created, shaped, and deployed by those in power to serve their own ends. In his eyes, what we call morality isn't truth, it's strategy. He drew a sharp line between two competing moral systems, master morality and slave morality. Master morality is born from strength. It celebrates ambition, boldness, creativity, and the will to shape the world. It does not wait for permission. It does not ask to be recognized. It declares its own value. The one who holds master morality defines good by what enhances their power, their freedom, their capacity to build and command. Strength is not seen as a threat, it is a virtue. And virtue is whatever affirms life, power, and possibility. But slave morality, that's different. Slave morality is born from weakness. It emerges from those who cannot compete on the battlefield of power, so they redefine the rules. They claim that humility is superior to strength, that obedience is nobler than dominance, that suffering is a sign of moral purity.
Look, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna talk about this a little bit. About that compressor. Got that compressor done, y'all. Got more power and everything in the goddamn car. Continue on with this little message about the working slave.
In this system, the qualities that once defined weakness are reframed as virtues, because it's the only way the powerless can find dignity in a world they cannot control. And here's the trap. Once this moral code spreads, it becomes sacred, untouchable. It's no longer seen as a strategy for survival, it's taught as absolute truth. This is how moral labor came to be praised. The idea that good people sacrifice, that honorable people serve, that virtue lies in doing your duty, expecting nothing in return. We romanticize the worker who never complains, who always says yes, who puts the needs of others before their own, without realizing that this narrative serves those who benefit from their silence. Nietzsche would tell you, you are not rewarded for your morality, you are pacified by it. You're praised for being dependable, promoted for being manageable, rewarded not to empower you, but to keep you from asking questions. The system throws you a title, a plaque, a raise just big enough to keep you hopeful, just small enough to keep you dependent. And all the while, the true currency, ownership, control, power remains out of reach. So why does this belief still hold so much power? Why do millions of people still cling to the promise that suffering equals virtue, that sacrifice will be seen, that obedience will be rewarded? Because the story is beautiful, because it gives meaning to pain, because it allows people to endure unfairness without confronting it. Slave morality survives not because it is true, but because it is comforting. And comfort is a powerful sedative. But Nietzsche didn't write to comfort, he wrote to awaken, to force us to confront the terrifying freedom that comes when you stop waiting for justice and start creating your own terms. And so the real question begins to take shape, not just why we were taught to suffer quietly, but who benefits when we do. But if this system is so rigged, so clearly designed to reward control over contribution, why do so many good people still believe in it? Why do millions of hard-working men and women continue to chase a promise that rarely delivers? The answer isn't just economic, it's psychological. It starts early, long before your first paycheck. From childhood, we're taught that the world is fair, that good things happen to good people, that justice will prevail. Stories, cartoons, school lessons, they all repeat the same comforting refrain. If you do what's right, you'll be rewarded. Be honest, be kind, be diligent, and in the end, life will make sense. But here's the problem. That belief has a name. Psychologists call it the just world fallacy. The idea that the world is inherently fair, that effort equals outcome, that what you give will always come back. It's a beautiful idea. It gives people hope. It helps us make sense of suffering. But it's not true.
It's an illusion.
Find your perfect sleep solution today at Rainmore and Flanagan. Sleep up to 10 degrees cooler with Tempur-Pedic.
And clinging to it, especially in a system designed to reward power over principle, isn't just naive. It's dangerous. Because while you're working late, double-checking spreadsheets, fixing problems you didn't cause, someone else is learning how to play the board. While you're saying yes, being polite, taking on the extra shift, someone else is building alliances, studying leverage, understanding exactly how to make the system work for them. You believe you're being moral, they're being strategic, and in this world, strategy wins. That's why the engineer who keeps the servers running gets laid off, while the reputation advisor with political connections gets promoted. That's why the nurse loses her weekend bonus, but the hospital's PR budget doubles. You've been taught to trust the latter. They were taught how to skip steps. And here's where it gets cruel. The system doesn't just fail to reward hard work, it uses your belief in fairness to keep you locked in place. The longer you wait for your virtue to be noticed, the easier you are to control. Because people who believe in justice don't rebel. They don't demand more. They keep waiting for recognition, for fairness, for someday. But someday never comes. This isn't just about money, it's about mindset. About understanding that if you keep showing up with the wrong map, you'll never reach the right destination. The rules you were taught were designed to produce good workers, not powerful people. Because the people who taught them to you, they understood the game. They just needed someone else to keep playing it. So if the world isn't fair, if virtue doesn't lead to victory, then what does? How do you survive without becoming ruthless? How do you move forward without losing your soul? The answer isn't to abandon morality. It's to stop worshiping it, to stop treating sacrifice like a strategy, to realize that good intentions are not a plan. That in a world built on power, understanding power is part of being good. Because when you open your eyes to the truth, that fairness is not a guarantee but a story we've been sold to keep us quiet, then you can finally begin to write your own. Not a story of blind sacrifice but of conscious strength. Not obedience but ownership. Not waiting for the world to change, but learning how to change your place in it. So what do you do once you've seen the lie? Once you realize that waiting to be rewarded for your obedience is a dead end? You don't throw away your morals. You redefine what strength looks like. This is the mistake many make when they first wake up. They think the only alternative to being exploited is becoming heartless. But Nietzsche didn't preach cruelty. He wasn't telling you to abandon integrity. He was telling you to stop confusing submission with virtue. His solution wasn't to destroy morality, but to overcome the morality of weakness. To become someone who doesn't just follow rules, but writes new ones. Someone who doesn't need permission to live with purpose. In Nietzsche's words, that person is the Übermensch, the overman, not a tyrant, not a villain, but a fully realized individual, a creator of values, someone who walks away from systems that no longer serve them and builds something better in their place. The Übermensch doesn't sit quietly, hoping to be seen. He defines his own meaning. He doesn't wait to be promoted. He creates impact on his terms. He understands the system, but isn't enslaved by it. He knows when to play the game and when to change the board. He understands that power isn't evil, it's necessary. Not power over others, but power over yourself, your direction, your destiny. You've seen these people in real life. The entrepreneur who walked away from a stable job to build something bold. The investor who turned rejection into innovation. The builder who stopped asking for permission and started taking risks. Think about Elon Musk, fired from the company he helped create. Dismissed by others as reckless, until he built an empire on vision, conviction, and the refusal to be ruled by fear. What separates these people isn't just talent or luck, it's mindset. They didn't wait for the system to validate them. They stopped asking, when will they see my worth, and started asking, why am I giving them that power in the first place? That shift, from waiting to creating, from submitting to owning, that's the path Nietzsche pointed to. That's what it means to step out of the cage of moral labor. But here's the hard truth. Escaping that cage means letting go of something deeply comfortable. Your attachment to being seen as good. It means being willing to disappoint people who benefit from your silence. It means being willing to stand alone for a time while you build a new foundation. That takes more than confidence. It takes courage. Because true strength isn't about domination, it's about authorship, about writing a life that aligns with your deepest values, not the values handed to you by a system designed to keep you docile. This isn't about becoming selfish, it's about becoming sovereign. So ask yourself, what would happen if you stopped waiting to be rewarded and started rewarding yourself with the life you actually want? What would it look like to stop asking for a seat at the table? and start building your own? You don't have to become ruthless, but you do have to become responsible for your own power. Because once you realize the system won't save you, the only path forward is to stop being a servant of it and start becoming the author of something greater. So what does action look like after the awakening? After you've seen through the illusion of moral labor, after you've stopped waiting for fairness, after you've chosen not to abandon morality but to reclaim your power, what's next? It starts with understanding this: kindness is not weakness, but strategic kindness, that's strength. Too often people confuse being good with being passive. They think saying yes, avoiding conflict, and putting others first makes them virtuous. But Nietzsche would say, morality without consciousness is just obedience in disguise. The goal is not to become cold or manipulative, it's to become conscious, to learn how to move through the world with both a moral compass and a survival strategy. Strategic kindness means knowing when to help and when to walk away. It means reading people, not just trusting them. It means understanding context, when to speak, when to stay silent, when to strike. It means you don't say yes to everyone just to be liked. You say yes when it aligns with your goals, your truth, your strength. Because here's the thing, not every job deserves your loyalty. Not every leader deserves your trust. Not every opportunity deserves your time. You must become the kind of person who knows when to walk away. When a situation is no longer serving you and has the strength to leave. Leaving is not failure. Sometimes it's the beginning of freedom. This is where power comes in, not as something you take from others, but something you claim for yourself. Power to create, power to say no, power to build systems where you're not just earning, you're owning, where your energy doesn't just fuel someone else's machine. It fuels a mission that reflects your values. That might mean starting your own business, or building a secondary income stream, or learning how influence works, not to deceive, but to defend your vision. It might mean learning negotiation, setting boundaries, saying, I won't do this anymore, and meaning it. These are not betrayals of your morals. These are expressions of your maturity. Because the truth is, if you don't learn how to play the power game, you will always be a pawn in it. But if you do learn, you don't have to lose your soul in the process. The key is to use power as a tool, not a trophy. Let your ethics guide your direction, but let strategy carry your decisions. Nietzsche put it simply, power is not evil. It's the will to become more. More than a servant, more than a cog, more than just the good employee.
Hey TikTok, it's Alan Walker, and if you want to get this, or this, search.
It's the will to become the author of your own worth. And you can't do that if you treat morality as a cage. You have to treat it as a compass, one that points to your north, not someone else's approval. So no, don't throw away your principles. Don't become another cynical player chasing status for status's sake. But do learn how the game is played. Do understand leverage. Do recognize when you're being used and when you're being seen. Because the future doesn't belong to the obedient. It belongs to the clear, the conscious, the ones who merge principle with power, empathy with edge. Not the ones who wait for the world to change, but the ones who learn to change the terms of their own existence. If you grew up believing that hard work is enough, that if you just keep your head down, stay loyal, and do things the right way, life will reward you, then it's time to wake up. Not because hard work is worthless, but because hard work without power, without strategy, without ownership, will keep you stuck. The real man doesn't just labor. He sees the system for what it is. He studies it, understands it, and when the rules no longer serve him, he writes new ones. That's the difference between surviving and leading, between being a cog in someone else's machine and becoming the architect of your own future. So if you're tired of waiting, If you're done with the myth that sacrifice is enough, if you're ready to think deeper, act smarter, and live on your own terms, this is where it begins. Subscribe to discover the kind of philosophy that doesn't just explain the world, but gives you the tools to reshape your place in it. One idea at a time, one decision at a time, one step closer to the man you were meant to become.
Yeah. Not a slave. Not a slave, goddammit. Like I said, everything that was taught to us and told to us was a goddamn lie. It's all exposed. Some of y'all living in y'all denial because you've been programmed. You program a goddamn robot that is under your spell, goddammit. But anyway, back to the goddamn air compressor, y'all. Put the air compressor on, got the air compressor put in. The car even ride much smoother with the new air compressor put on. I had looked it up that with a fucked up air compressor and have your car running rough, you understand me? So I noticed the change in the ride with the new air compressor on. And shit. 280, 285, 285, 286 for the total job. $286, ladies and gentlemen, to get the air compressor put on. I told you Magic Hot Round was trying to charge me $750 when I dropped it off to the car. I mean to the garage up on 4th and Highland. Magic Ryan tried to charge me $750. He thought I was Boo-Boo the Fool. He thought he seen a sucker coming through the door. But what he didn't realize, it was a fucking lion coming through the door, goddammit, that got resources, that know that you're not the only mechanic that the Most High created, goddammit. You take that $750 and you get and shove that one up your ass. You can get one of them females or somebody like that just dropped out the womb with that price, goddammit. I looked at him sideways after that one. Ain't to be trusted. Trust no one, ladies and gentlemen. I don't give a fuck what their profession is. Trust no one. Everything that was taught and told to us was a motherfucking lie. So the person that's standing in front of you, 9 times out of 10, he telling you a motherfucking lie. You understand me? Check. But back to the compressor, everything is everything. We got air, ladies and gentlemen. Shit cold as a motherfucker. This is what I wanted. And this is what I got. Thanks to the mechanic, 21 gun salute. Shit, car riding quiet as a motherfucker, man. The idle, the RPM is just a little bit under 1. Where it need to be at. You understand me? Shit, we back. Got that shit knocked off. They said the day supposed to be a little hazy today. Hotter than what it was yesterday. Shit, we was on a 3-day tour yesterday, y'all. We was all over the city, riding, walking, you understand me? Picked the young king up, took him to urgent care, left there, took him to the headquarters. And then my man called me about 4:30, 4:45. It was like, I'm done. I'm like, bet. Said, that shit ice cold up in that motherfucker. I said, my man, pots and pans. But yeah, y'all, we back. Like I said, y'all always do y'all research. You can take your car to a mechanic that knows shit and have them diagnose your car. And then Hawk spit bullshit with him for a little bit, like you're gonna get the job done from there. But shit, you gone. You going somewhere else and get that shit done. Thanks for the diagnostics, my man. I know I can go right online and get a motherfucking air compressor. And I know my man, he can do the job. Like I said, he charged me a Bingsky. The air compressor was 106. We had 206 right there. And then the 2 cans of Freon That's 25. Understand me? We had 236. Yeah, we had 236. I gave him an extra $50, man. I gave him $1.50 for putting the air compressor on for me. I mean, I like to throw a little tip in there, you know what I mean? So when they see my number pop up, they know from the rip, oh yeah, he good peoples. He tipping everything. So $1.50 for the labor, plus the tip, $1 for the compressor. We had what, $2.50? And then the Freon, $25 for 2 cans. That's $2.75. That's where we at with it, $2.75 compared to $7.50. Hold on. Like I said, y'all, $7.50. He probably banking I'm coming back, but I'm not coming back. I'm not coming back, ladies and gentlemen. He probably think I'm coming back. Probably like he gonna need it because it's gonna heat up. Shit, he don't even know the job already done. He talking 2 days and $7.50. Shit, you a motherfucking lie. But anyway, I ain't gonna give him that much energy. Like I said, when the Most High created things, he didn't just create one. You understand me? That's why we give all praises to the Most High. Every day, we don't call on the Most High when we're in desperate need. We call on the Most High every day, goddammit. Don't get it fucked up. Every goddamn day. You understand me? But we about to get on up out of here. Take it on to the quarters. Just dropped the young king off to school. Days are rolling down, boiling down. Probably got like another week and some change. School to be out. Summer break. And the rest is history. Understand me?
You're not looking for a shortcut to success. You just want to know your time and effort will pay off in the long run.
Have you ever felt like your mere presence bothers people? Not because you said something wrong or acted with hostility, but simply because you were yourself. No masks, no need to please.
Yeah, that's right. I'd rather be hated for who I am than love for who I'm not. Facts.
Not laughing at things you don't find funny. Not agreeing with what you find absurd. The silence of someone who thinks differently often echoes louder than 1,000 voices repeating the same thought. Nietzsche knew this. That's why he said the world hates those who refuse to obey. We live surrounded by invisible structures demanding conformity. Standards of behavior, imposed morality, social rules that cannot be questioned without being labeled arrogant, difficult, or problematic. But is obedience really a sign of virtue? Or is it in many cases just fear? Fear of being judged, rejected, excluded. Because deep down, being free is an offense to a world built on repetition. True freedom, the kind that starts within, as a visceral rejection of pretending, is seen as a threat, and not without reason. When someone decides to be honest with themselves, they reveal what others try to hide, that they live according to others' expectations. The refusal to obey exposes the cowardice of those who follow rules without knowing why, who shape their opinions based on what the group accepts, who need applause just to feel alive. The free person makes others uncomfortable because they don't need an audience. Nietzsche understood there's a subtle kind of violence in the demand for obedience. It's not about chains or physical restraints, but a constant pressure to stay silent, to adapt, to shrink yourself. The world fears those who break from that because they function like mirrors. They expose what no one wants to see, that freedom requires courage, sacrifice, clarity, and that most people would rather enjoy the comfort of a cage then take on the responsibility of thinking for themselves. So if you've ever felt this discomfort simply by existing, you're not alone. You're just free in a place where everyone has been trained to obey. Nietzsche never trusted traditional morality. To him, the idea of virtue we're taught from a young age didn't come from nobility, but from resentment. In On the Genealogy of Morals, he maps out a dark path. The values we now consider good, like humility, obedience, submission, were created by the weak, not as a celebration of goodness, but as revenge against the strong. Kindness became a kind of disguise, a subtle strike. If I can't be like you, I'll turn your strength into evil and my weakness into purity. That's how obedience gained the status of virtue. This mechanism started with slave morality. Slaves in the symbolic sense, those who feel powerless, oppressed, and secretly envy others' freedom. Instead of confronting that impotence, they built a value system where resignation is praised and rebellion is condemned. Courage became arrogance, autonomy became pride, boldness became sin. Slowly, we were trained to believe that being obedient is being good, but no one asks, good for whom? Morality, in this view, is a tool of control. It doesn't guide us toward goodness, it domesticates us. We're praised when we lower our heads, when we follow the line, when we don't question. The better you adapt, the more likely you'll be labeled as exemplary. But if you challenge things, you're branded difficult, selfish, or dangerous. Nietzsche invites us to look beyond this. He asks, are you really good or just well-trained? The culture of obedience didn't take over through force, but through seduction. It presents itself as ethics, as spirituality, as a path to peace. But in many cases, it's just fear disguised as virtue. It's the renunciation of your own judgment, the suspension of critical thinking in the name of supposed order. And anyone who tries to step outside becomes an anomaly. Because questioning the roots of morality isn't just philosophy, it shakes the very foundation that holds the herd together. Being free in this context isn't just about disobeying external rules, it's realizing that many of your convictions were implanted, and having the courage to ask, do I truly believe in this, or did I just get used to obeying? Nietzsche didn't write to please, he wrote to shake people awake. And one of the most disturbing images he gives us is that of the last man. This figure isn't cruel or wicked. In fact, he's harmless. He spends his life chasing comfort, safety, small pleasures, and social approval. He no longer wants to take risks, to suffer, or to become more than what he is. He just wants to be like everyone else, equal, predictable, domesticated. And that's exactly why he marks the end of human greatness. The last man is the final product of herd morality. He runs from pain, avoids conflict, and distrusts anything that requires effort or depth. He's traded autonomy for stability, his thoughts for prepackaged opinions. Freedom terrifies him, because it implies responsibility. It means looking at himself and confronting the emptiness that appears when there are no more rules to follow. Faced with that, he chooses obedience, not out of virtue, but out of fear. Nietzsche saw this figure as a degeneration of life, a tired, worn-out spirit that prefers comfortable mediocrity over the risky intensity of freedom. And here's where the real problem starts. When someone dares to step outside this pattern, they don't just threaten the social order, they disturb the emotional safety of the herd. The presence of a free thinker is unsettling because it forces others to ask themselves, what if I'm just hiding? And no one wants to face that answer. That's why those who refuse to obey are discredited, labeled as crazy, egocentric, radical, not for what they do, but for what they represent. A break from the norm, a crack in the consensus, a reminder that living on autopilot might not be real life. The herdman doesn't hate the authentic out of malice, but out of defense. He needs to protect his closed world from any sign of possibility. And here lies the paradox. The closer someone gets to inner freedom, the more dangerous they become to those who are trapped. Because because their very existence proves there's a way out. And those who rely on crutches can't stand seeing someone walk on their own 2 feet. Obedience isn't just a moral demand, it's, above all, the foundation of social coexistence. In a world where everything must operate with precision, where each person plays a predetermined role, obedience guarantees predictability. It prevents chaos, reduces conflict, keeps the wheels turning. But at what cost? The same order that protects also imprisons. The same stability that soothes also drains vitality. Often, the price of harmony is the death of spontaneity. From an early age, we're taught that obedience is the safest path. Those who question too much are labeled insolent. Those who choose their own steps are viewed with suspicion. A system has been built where being well adapted is seen as success, even if that adaptation comes at the cost of one's soul. And what's most curious is that this obedience is rarely enforced through direct violence. Most of the time, it's internalized as a virtue. The individual learns to police themselves, to trim their own impulses, to repress their most intimate truths for the sake of acceptance. The German thinker saw this as a sign of cultural weakness. To him, real strength wasn't in following orders, but in creating one's own path. Rather than settling for ready-made answers, the free spirit longs to understand, even if it leads to discomfort, conflict, or solitude. But this search for authenticity destabilizes the silent pact of society. Because when someone refuses to obey, they're not just making a personal choice. They're exposing the artificiality of the rules that others follow without question. The figure who breaks from the social order reveals another way of existing, and that makes people uneasy. It shows that the system might not be natural or inevitable, that obedience might be a choice, not an obligation, and that beneath the appearance of peace, there's a silent emotional cost, the suffocation of the self. It's not easy to deal with that. That's why those who are different are often pushed to the margins, not for being violent, but for being true. In a world where everyone has been trained to bend, the one who remains upright looks dangerous. Obedience doesn't come out of nowhere. It's taught, cultivated, repeated like a mantra from the earliest years of life. The child who questions too much is scolded. The one who follows rules without hesitation is praised. Little by little, we're shaped by a subtle but relentless pedagogy, an education that doesn't form free individuals, but subjects trained to accept, to fit in, to stay silent when something feels wrong. School, instead of awakening thought, often becomes the first laboratory of domestication. The philosopher viewed with suspicion those institutions that preach morality, but demand submission. It's no coincidence that he fiercely attacked educational systems, religious structures, and political systems alike. To him, there wasn't much difference between a pastor's sermon, a politician's speech, or a teacher's lecture that won't tolerate being questioned. In all of them, there's a hidden message. Don't think for yourself. Follow the path we've already drawn for you. Traditional religion taught for centuries that salvation comes through obedience. That doubt is a sin. That humility is a virtue, even when it turns into self-denial. Politics, in turn, sells freedom as a promise, but demands absolute loyalty to the very systems it created. And deep down, all these structures share the same desire: to keep the individual under control, to reduce their potential, to neutralize their ability to disrupt the order. The free spirit is seen as a problem from the start, because they ask questions that have no easy answers, because they don't accept "it's always been this way" as justification, and because, even in silence, they carry in their eyes a spark that threatens everything designed to keep the masses at peace: the will to live on their own terms. This pedagogy of servitude works largely because it's dressed in good intentions. It disguises itself as care, as guidance, as protection. But the result is an army of souls afraid of themselves, who avoid the mirror, who trade truth for comfort. And when they see someone breaking that cycle, they feel attacked, as if the other's freedom were a personal insult. To be free in this world is a silent crime. And like any crime that threatens the system, it must be punished. Even if the punishment comes in the form of isolation, disdain, or invisibility. Society doesn't need prisons to punish those who break the invisible contract of obedience. There's a much more effective kind of punishment: emotional isolation. When someone thinks differently, acts unexpectedly, or simply refuses to accept certain norms without questioning them, they aren't immediately confronted. They're slowly silenced. Mockery, veiled contempt passed off as humor, subtle exclusion. It's not a direct attack, but a gradual erasure. That's the price paid by those who don't bow. It doesn't matter how just or serene someone's stance is. If they stray from the collective path, they become a target. And not necessarily for what they do, but for what they represent. The mere fact of not needing external approval is seen as arrogance. The courage to live by one's own truth is labeled egotism. Integrity becomes insolence. Because anyone who dares to be whole in a fragmented world ends up being mistaken for a threat. The German thinker claimed that real freedom is not the absence of external chains. It's the inner readiness to be hated, rejected, and still remain standing. And that may be the cruelest part. The solitary rebel isn't necessarily at war with the world, but the world wages war against him. Not because he's an enemy, but because his existence reveals a flaw in the system, a crack in the facade of unanimity. The different one pays dearly for refusing to conform, not with physical violence, but with the weight of indifference, with eyes that look right through them, with conversations where their opinion is ignored, with spaces where their presence is tolerated, but never truly welcomed. It's exile without a name, a punishment that leaves no visible marks, but eats away from within. And yet, it is from this marginal place that true freedom is born, because the one who survives silence learns to hear their own voice. The one who endures exclusion finds within themselves a deeper presence, and the one who doesn't kneel before the will of others begins to walk on their own, even if it's down lonely paths. They walk among us with the upright posture of those who refuse to pretend. They are silent, but their silence echoes like thunder. They have no intention of confronting anyone, yet their mere presence is destabilizing. Because by carrying the weight of exile, by resisting domestication, they become dangerous. And it's precisely that danger that signals the birth of something new. A type of human being who no longer lives under the rules of the herd, nor bows to the applause of the obedient. It's at this point that the most provocative image of the one who dared to think against the current begins to emerge. The Overman. Not a superhero, nor a superior being in the usual sense, but someone who has broken with slave morality, who has destroyed within themselves the need to please, and now lives from an internal center, without asking for permission to exist. They do not obey, not out of stubbornness or vanity, but because nothing outside them is worthy of blind submission anymore. They have become their own law, their own measure, their own standard. This figure doesn't seek acceptance, doesn't long to belong, because they understand that every attempt to fit into molds created by others is a form of self-mutilation. What they want is to create new values, new ways of living, new ways of being human.
If this is under $60, I'm gonna buy it. It's heavy.
Their path is solitary, not because they hate others, but because most people still wouldn't be able to walk beside someone who abandoned the old maps. They do not lead crowds. They simply light the way for those ready to see. There's no romanticism in this path. What there is strength. A strength born from direct confrontation with emptiness, with anguish, with the absurd. They pass through it all without guarantees, without rewards, because they know that true greatness isn't about being recognized. It's about being faithful to who you are, even if no one applauds, even if everything around you tries to convince you that living authentically is a mistake. And so, This being who walks at the edge of the crowd slowly becomes a sacred and unsettling presence. They demand nothing from others, but simply by existing, they force people to ask themselves whether they are truly alive or just obeying out of habit. But living like this comes with a cost, and it's not a small one. Those who decide to break free from the invisible chains of obedience don't find peace right away. They find the desert first. Solitude isn't a metaphor. It's real, dense, cutting. Those who leave the herd don't step into blooming fields. They step into ruins. Ruins of old certainties, of friendships that couldn't handle the difference, of bonds that only existed as long as there was submission. Freedom isn't a promise of comfort. It's an invitation to clarity. And clarity at times hurts like an open wound. There are days when silence weighs more than any scream, when the absence of belonging feels like a cruel punishment. And that's when many ask themselves, is it worth it? What's the point of so much effort if all it brings is rejection, misunderstanding, and sideways glances? But that's the trap. The world tries to make the pain of authenticity feel like failure, when in truth, it's the sign that you are truly alive. Because only those who rip themselves from rotten roots feel the ground tremble. The thinker who inspired this path never promised a happy ending. He didn't sell success formulas or offer spiritual refuge. What he offered was something else: intensity, authenticity, truth. And that can't be found in comfort zones. It only reveals itself to those willing to bleed a little to be whole, to those unafraid to look inside and see everything they left behind for the sake of acceptance. Because in the end, what's gained is not tranquility, it's depth. This is the solitary path, walking among ruins and still standing tall, refusing shortcuts, enduring the void, holding your presence even when no one else sees your worth. It's not about pride, it's about dignity, not about superiority, but about integrity. Because for some, obedience is simply impossible. It would be the same as betraying their own soul. And perhaps, right at this point, a deeper question begins to emerge. Can the truth even be spoken? Or does the world need lies to keep functioning? Truth, contrary to what many believe, does not illuminate. It burns. It doesn't comfort. It exposes. And for that reason, it's almost always unwanted. In a society built on masks, repetition, and convenient narratives, telling the truth is like turning on a light that's far too bright in a room where everyone prefers the shadows. It's no surprise that those who dare to name what is hidden are seen as threats. Lies bring people together, soothe and reassure. But truth separates, unsettles, and destroys illusions that once felt safe. That's why the obedient are promoted. Because they don't make waves. They repeat what they were taught, believe what's socially acceptable, praise what's trendy, and never ask questions that could endanger the system. They are the ideal citizen, predictable, polite, domesticated. But the one who thinks for themselves is a problem, because by saying what no one wants to hear, they reveal just how much everyone else is sustaining a theater. And no one likes to be reminded that they're acting. The German thinker understood this dynamic with fierce clarity. To him, truth is not a goal for everyone. It's a destination for the few who can bear it, because it demands courage. And
working on that street down there on Townsend too, y'all. 3rd and Townsend. Probably rode on that motherfucker and probably said, damn, this motherfucker is about to collapse. It was like a free fall drop. Donny Park local, and they got it shut down. Definitely got it shut down. Rizzo's closed. done. They just would have finished it when they did the job, you know what I'm saying? Alright, y'all. I'm heading to the callers. It was a pleasure.